come downtown to shoot a nice intro for this, but there's a protest and bagpipes, so I'm not quite sure this spot's gonna work out. So we're gonna try again. I'm gonna give it maybe 20 minutes, and if that ain't work, we'll go yonder. Hi there, my name is Matthew Enright, and I'm a filmmaker from a land called Canada. I've been very lucky to work behind the camera on a lot of cool television and film projects, but I've never quite had a show to call my own. So I've interviewed some of my closest friends, colleagues, and enemies just to talk about their journeys and how they got there. Our first interviewee is with director Joel McCarthy, who's one of the busiest directors in Vancouver. We talk about how he transitioned from being an indie filmmaker to professional, as well as how having a child in his mid-20s, perhaps unexpectedly, affected his outlook on life. So without further ado, welcome to the show, my friend and yours, Joel McCarthy. Thank you. I know how busy you are, and thanks so much for taking time out of your day to do this. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
So I guess first of all, can you just state your name and your occupation?
I'm Joel McCarthy, and I'm a filmmaker, a film teacher, and a festival organizer, I guess. I wear a lot of hats.
Canadian film industry, baby. And if we go down your credits, did you know you have 17 director credits, 16 actor credits, 14 editor credits, 13 writer credits, 11 producer credits, 6 editorial department credits, 6 sound credits, 4 cinematographer credits, and 3 camera and electrical credits. That is 90 credits, not including the stuff that you're uncredited for on IMDb alone.
I did not know that. I haven't been creeping there in a while. I'm curious. I feel like sometimes I'm like an old senior, and I'm like, oh yeah, I did work on that thing. It's weird because these things are like 1 or 2 days, and they're so intimate. You know, sometimes they're weeks or whatever, and then yeah, you just have like a little line on IMDb, and you're like, oh yeah, that was a good time.
Yeah, I don't know if you know it, but you went to Burning Man one year.
I did. I went twice. I went back with my parents after. Because shooting a doc at Burning Man is terrible, and it's much better to experience. But
yeah, great. I can imagine. So I guess my first question is just where your love for film first stems from. Is this something that was like a childhood passion, or what ignited that interest?
I mean, I always liked movies, but there was a local skate shop that sold little VHS tapes of Camp Kill Yourself, CKY. Which was basically like the predecessor of Jackass. And my friend had got his hands on CKY. I think we were like 9 or 10 years old. And we, snuck into his basement and watched this. And it was like the wildest thing I'd ever seen. It was a bunch of like really dumb, basically white guys doing dumb stunts, hurting each other, doing like the dumbest shit ever. And it showed me that like anyone can make a film. And when you're watching a Hollywood film, it always seems so reserved. But the thing I loved about CKY was it was so lo-fi, but so entertaining. And at that point I was like, at the very beginning, it's like huge, like, do not attempt any of these stunts. These are done by professionals. And then like at 10 years old, you're like, holy shit, we could be stunt professionals. And like from then on, we just like started shooting all sorts of stuff. It's crazy how inspirational it was, considering it's just so debaucherous, and like it hasn't aged well at all, but it was magic watching that for the first time and being like, whoa, that discovery that like we could just make films and you don't need to have the Hollywood machine.
That's when like DV tapes were fresh and new. Like that was really the first time, like the late 90s.
Yeah.
Late 90s, yeah. A friend of mine in Manitoba, he was part of a different crew called, I think the abbreviation Dumb People Doing Dumb Things, and you can still look it up.
Oh, nice.
And they just similar to CKY, they did their own thing. They self-distributed DVDs, and he even had a audition for MTV to be on a reality show, and he ended up going to the Hollywood Theater, and they filmed this skit of him putting lemon juice, the Joker, a guy cosplaying as a Joker,
put lemon juice in his eyeball, and that was like one of his audition tapes for MTV. But then he didn't know about green cards. It's like, he was at 20 something, and but you can still YouTube it and find their stuff online. But I've known him for years, and I only just found that out through somebody else while I was visiting my grandparents. I'm like, why didn't you tell me this? He's like, kind of. To him, he wants to leave it behind. But to me, it's like, I want to interview him. Like, there's so much. How many of us have had like an audition for MTV? But not to digress too much. Do you remember the first movie you watched, maybe as a kid, that kind of inspired you besides sort of the CKY stuff? Like, was there a theater experience or something that's on cable?
I remember seeing, like, as a kid, like, I feel like seeing Aladdin and what's the other one? Oh, what one really pumped me up, I think, was Small Soldiers.
Commandos, attack! No mercy!
Incoming! Small Soldiers.
That was like another one that I just like, you just get really obsessed with, and you're like, whoa, this is
it's underrated, I think.
It just seemed like a world that I was just like so excited about. And then Aladdin I was a huge fan of.
Das ist logisch, hochprozentig, ökologisch.
I really love movies. Just as a viewer, it was just like magic. And like, when I was in like 8 or so, we went to like Universal Studios, and like the idea of being at these places where these movies were shot was just like, it blew my mind. But it wasn't until later that I, had moments knowing that it was accessible. But and then like another informative one was Alien vs. Predator was shooting in Port Coquitlam. And it was like, to me, it was like the most exciting thing. And I knew that they were going to do a night shoot at like the City Hall type thing.
So it begins.
So like, I was like, early high school or something like that. I can't remember my exact age, but like I loaded up coffee and I stood on the outside and like was there for like almost an entire night shoot, getting the closest place I could stand, and like talking to anyone I could. My parents just like dropped me off there, and like,
wow,
it was incredible. And I was like, whoa. And like, I got to see them like set up for like what seemed to be hours for like one little explosion thing. But it was just like so magical to like, be around movies. And I kind of started thinking like, this is a possibility. And like, from like 10, I was like dead set that like, I want to be a director. I want to make movies. It was basically the moment I saw CKY, it was like, oh, I can do this.
Wow. I would have never guessed that was the seed for all this inspiration of like these very like, emotional films that you've made. It all stems, CKY is just the last thing I would think of.
I just think that the idea of democratized film, it just never came to my attention that just like a person could make a film, right? It just, Hollywood always seemed so far, and that was the bridge that I needed to like go, okay, I can do this, right? Because at the time there's, all shooting on tape and stuff like that. And nothing really looked like a movie that you could make at home. And
actually, that's another thing is I want to get into that a bit more, sort of in terms of the low budget stuff. But before we do, like, at what point did you realize like you wanted to go to film school?
I knew that like I wanted to go to like basically at 10. It was like I pretty much like never grew out of like my childhood dreams of like wanting to be a filmmaker. So maybe at the time I wasn't thinking about film school, but definitely in high school I was, and like I wanted to go to CAP. They had their 4-year program there. And I had got the chance in grade 12 to act in a final at CAP. So it was like a really cool experience to just like see, what I might be learning in film school. And I was just like so excited to be there. And anyone I could talk to was like, oh, you're a script supervisor? What's that? Tell me everything. And like, I knew I wanted to be a part of this.
That's awesome. Can I read you what the definition of tenacity is?
All right.
There's 3 points here. Number 1 is tending to keep a firm hold of something, clinging or adhering closely. Number 2 is not readily relinquishing a position, principle, or course of action determined. And lastly, it is persisting in existence, not easily dispelled. Now, I brought that up because I want to ask you about grad camping and the grad camping film.
Oh, no. Yeah. The grad camp film? Yeah. Did Mike tell you about this?
Can you explain to people what you did? Because this is incredible. This is really thinking 2 steps ahead.
Oh my God. I'm so, yeah, it's so cringy. I watched it recently. So basically, when I was finishing up in grade 12, there were 100 of us going grad camping at this like campsite type thing. And I tried to pitch the school doing a video yearbook that year. And they were like, no, we don't want to do that. And like, I broke down, like, this is like the budget of things, whatever. And like the idea that I was basically trying to like operate a business out of the school, they were like not really down for. But with our grad camping, I knew that there was like, I had filmed a few like high school parties, and like they were so funny to rewatch because like drunk teens are so fucking funny.
This is lunch action. How about that right there?
It's like terrible, and this is a time like in the mid 2000s where none of our politically correct conversations have happened, really, right? And all like the comedy out there was like big shock comedy sort of stuff, right? So I decided that while we were going grad camping, I was going to film a feature-length documentary documenting grad camp. And it is like, I didn't have music clearances and stuff like that, and I just basically shot, and it's like a weekend trip, and like ended up having like a bunch of like crazy plot things that happened. Like there was, things like there was a drunk, one of the students got into another car, was like super drunk, and like almost like ran over people and like hit into a tree, and like the whole car like crumpled into the tree. And like I have the direct aftermath, and you have like a group of like 10 it's like 20 drunk boys trying to be macho. They're like, look at the rad, man. They like try to like diagnose what's wrong with the car, and it's like the funniest thing you've ever seen. And so it's a lot of fun. And so I just sold like 100 copies out of the back of my trunk on like the last day of school, and basically paid for a good chunk of my film school with my little bootleg DVDs there. But I guess it's like unofficially my first feature film, and I recently rewatched it, and it's haunting. Like there's so much cringe moments in there, and it's so much is just like not aged well, and like a lot of like the guys being like pretty much the butt of every joke is like, you're gay, but also the stuff that's like really funny is just like, you're like, yeah, I had like 25 beers last night and I was barely buzzed. And like just the way that like everyone's just like, all these people that you thought were like really cool back then, they're just it's so transparent how lame they are when you have like the hindsight of like 20 or 15 years or whatever, and you're watching it. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm happy I did it, but like I'm cringed that it exists.
For our grad camp, and I should say Garrett Wilson, we drove there, and then driving back, and again, it was a shit show, a crazy grad camping. That's a whole different story. As we were driving out, we slid on rocks, and we're in this car, and we hit a giant boulder and flew up in the air, literally like Dukes of Hazzard, except the difference between real Dukes of Hazzard and real life is you fly up, but you don't continue. You literally just go flat down. And anyway, we were able to walk away from it, but we had to walk like 2 hours to the ferry, and then my mom picked us up from the other side, and then his car ended up getting towed. It was just slippery gravel, Another question I had for you is, in terms of when you're creating content, obviously, you're working commercially now. Do you always, when you're working on your own project, does it have to be something that entertains yourself first? Or now are you a little looser with that you're able to, kind of pay bills?
I mean, I try to turn it into a film I like. Like basically, it's like the first priority of a film project, especially like since I've become a parent and like my time is a little bit more limited, unfortunately. Like I can't just like take tons of time off and like shoot dumb shit with my friends all the time, which is tough. It's been a lot to cope with. But my number one thing that I try to think about is like, is this something I would watch? And like trying to make the movie that I want to see is like a big priority to me. But I think now, like, if it's like, if I'm not getting paid, it has to be something that I'm so in love with that I know is going to be something that I want to watch. If I am getting paid, I'm going to fight as hard as I can to turn it into something I want to watch. Right. So it all depends. Just because I can't, but I'm getting like a little bit more choosy these days, I guess. And it's just like, it's so hard to like figure out childcare and all that sort of stuff. It's like a really tough period. And hopefully once my kid gets a little more autonomy, it'll be a little bit easier.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully just, kindergarten, grade 1, I don't know how far off that is now, but hopefully that'll, alleviate or give you some, bit more freedom, I guess.
Well, he is in kindergarten now. It's the ending at 3 p.m. that's like so tough, and then like having a job and stuff like that. But I'm trying. I'm chipping away. I have my little things that I like to do.
That's good. You worked on independent projects, for a while after film school. And I'm just wondering, basically the two most successful commercial directors out of our grad class, I want to say, and I could be missing someone, is you and Gigi. And I don't think there's any mystery why. It's because you guys just kept working your asses off, and everyone involved with you guys too. Like you guys just kept grinding. I'm wondering for you, if as you're seeing sort of other people maybe work commercially, how do you stay motivated if you're not getting that dream job that you're waiting for? How do you keep that passion when you're not getting that immediate like validation?
It's so tough because like I think the big thing is like, first of all, you have to accept that Calvary is not coming.
Faster.
Waiting for someone else to discover you or to give you that golden opportunity. It's just not a thing that usually happens. Like if you look at working directors, they usually are working because they went and made a bunch of stuff, then people liked it, right? Like it's hard to get that opportunity until you've shown that you've made something successful. So I think for myself, like my goal was like, always keep creating. And when I got out of film school, I found a place where I was living with a few friends where the rent was $350 a month each, which you've lived in a place like that at one point.
I was a couple blocks from you, actually. I lived there for 4 years, and they tore down the house
the Eaton house is gone?
Moved out. Oh, yeah, it's long gone. It's still there, but it's been re-rented. He's making God knows how much money on it now.
Fair, but just like having that opportunity where you could work a few days, because I was doing like a lot of like videos for companies and stuff like that. So like I was able to make it like filmmaking my job, even if it was like, oh, let's do an ad for like a flooring company or something like that. So I basically had a system where I was only working a number of days a week, but I also could dedicate crazy amounts of time to my filmmaking, which like it was just a blessing. Like, and at that time I was just following passion. I'm like, I got this great idea. Let's just do this. Like, we can shoot this with 5 people or whatever, right? Like a lot of my stuff was always like writing around the practicality and like, oh, this person wants to work with me and they have a red cam. Let's build a project around that and stuff like that. So, a lot of it was just like not waiting for grants and things to come. And like the odd thing did come, but like, I don't know, most of my world of putting myself out there for grants and all that sort of stuff has been just pretty fruitless and pretty demoralizing. So I just kind of kept creating stuff. And then, those things start to win awards or people get excited by those things. And like, yeah, I had an experience when I was, there was someone I always looked up to that was filmmaking in my community that was like a number of years older than me. And he went to the same high school as me. And he was an amazing filmmaker and was someone who I would always get compared to as I was growing up. So it was kind of hard living in this little shadow. And then he went through film school, made some great stuff in film school, won great awards, and then did like basically nothing for years. And I ran into him like 5 years after he graduated film school. And I was like, what are you working on now? And he was still trying to finish this one short that he shot years ago and like just kind of disappeared off the map. And for me, that scared the shit out of me because I knew that guy, it always seemed like that guy was going to make it. And like, they were like, it was an unachievable thing that I was always trying to like reach where he was at. And then all of a sudden, as soon as he didn't have someone assigning him assignments where it's like, you have to make this film, this is your final project or whatever. As soon as that disappeared, there was nothing getting turned out. And that to me was like really terrifying. And that was like, I ran into him like right near when I was graduating, and that completely changed how I went about filmmaking. Cause I was like, no one's going to come save me. They weren't there for him. It's not like they're going to magically swoop in for me. I have to make it happen.
Yeah, I was thinking like the only two feature films I can think shot for under 10 grand, and one of them's already a cheat, is the first Paranormal Activity, which they went back and reshot a bunch of stuff once they got picked up by a major distributor. And then there's Shooting the Musical, which he shot for 5 grand, which is just fucking crazy. So for the people who don't know, can you just sort of give the Spark Note version of Shooting the Musical?
So it originally was called After Film School, and the idea was it was basically it was originally kind of written as like a fuck you to Canadian film in a way.
Would a homo do this? Would a homo do that? Would a homo bring a gun to school and end your life with a splat?
Because we're doing, especially with like taking my parents to Burning Man. We were really having a really hard time getting any resources or love in Canada, and a lot of it was happening in the States. And so I kind of was like really just annoyed that there wasn't much support for upcoming filmmakers that were like doing low budget features and stuff like that. And so I kind of was joking about like, basically like, what do you have to do? You have to make like some fucking like what's like the most outrageous thing you have to do to get attention? Like, cause I basically was joking, like, what do you need to make like a film about like a high school shooting and make it a fancy Broadway musical or whatever. Right. So it was kind of like just like a little joke that kind of turned into like, I started like in my head thinking about what songs would exist in a high school shooting musical. And I was just like, I had a bit of a fucked up sense of humor, and I started kind of circling around that. And with my girlfriend at the time, we were kind of just like joking about this like fake movie that we were building, but we're like, oh God, you can never get away with that. And then we ended up, coming up with this story about a guy outside of film school who's basically making his like, best friend and roommate, who was a talented filmmaker, dies, and they leave behind a script, and this guy's like, yeah, I'm going to make this script. And he realizes that the script's too boring that he turns it into a high school shooting musical. And it basically was an excuse to get all of like the dark humor I loved at the time into a movie. And I'm really proud of how it turned out. It's an obnoxious film, and it was nothing but like beg, borrowing, and stealing. And like some scenes we shot with, a 2-person crew. It was me doing like sound and directing, and Charles DPing. And some scenes we had like 20 people's crew, and like we made it work with our resources, and it was shot over weekends. And like, I'm super proud of that project, and I just have nothing but love for it. There's a few jokes where I'm like, oh, I wouldn't make that now. But it still stands out, and I still get people who will watch it and they're just like, what is this film? How come I had not heard of it? I don't know. I have a lot of love for the film.
Just because it's a comedy musical about high school shooting doesn't mean that it can't have themes that make us ponder the human condition.
Oh yeah, I rewatched it. I watched I think when you had a rough or early cut, I should say, and then I watched it during COVID when you guys did the live screening because I'd never seen the ending you guys reshot. So that was really cool to revisit. And the thing to watch that movie is you'd never in a million years know, because it looks like a professional. I mean, it is a professional movie, but you never know that it was a two-person crew at some points because the movie's consistent from beginning to end in terms of the high bar of quality. And I guess in terms of, you're like me in that when it comes to humor, I like it as black as my coffee, and I like humor pushed to the most uncomfortable boundaries to the point in which people squirm, because that's what I really find funny. When you're, making a short or a film, are you worried about what the audience is thinking, or you're just like, I like this?
I mean, I'm pretty obsessed with what the audience is thinking as I go. More like, how can I send them into a false sense of security and then throw something crazy at them? And I love audience reactions. It's as much as it's terrifying having your content play, but when you get the gasp at the right point or the squirm, all that sort of stuff. So I don't obsess about I'm getting better. I think as when I was younger, I really wanted to care what, critics and festivals and things like that thought of the film. But now I really, it's the audience experience is key. And so, yeah, I think the big thing is there's so many people making content out right now, and you got to do something that's somewhat bold, original, or different, or else it just disappears. And so I think where a lot of my early comedy stuff was quite black, and I still have aspects of that. And I love doing something wholesome and then throwing something really dark, and then people are just like, what? But I just like playing with the audience, and it's a beautiful thing. And, not everyone is, I don't know, if you try to make a film that everyone is going to love, no one's going to like it, because you're just going to make no real choices. And the biggest crime that you commit as a filmmaker is to leave an audience bored.
Yeah. That's interesting. And that's not to say because your body of work is very diverse, you get into the more touching things of Inconceivable. And if people who don't know about it, can you also just sort of explain what Inconceivable was?
Yeah, well, I didn't plan on becoming a parent at the young age I did. But, I was starting to see someone very casually who generally dates women and hadn't really had a situation where they were dating a man, and we were just it was all very casual. And then all of a sudden we had a broken condom followed by a failed morning after pill, and she was pregnant, and it was oh my God, what are we going to do? And so we weren't really together. We didn't know how we were going to make things happen, but we decided that we were going to keep this child. And I just didn't really see that story. I think the thing that was really tough was I grew up in such a white bread, suburban family that a lot of what I was indoctrinated with was, the nuclear family stuff. And I kind of lived in that. And then all of a sudden now I'm trying to figure out well, what does it look like when you're a parent and, you've got two parents and you got living in two homes maybe, or maybe you're living together and you're not romantically together. And there's just so much crazy shit that we were experiencing and things that we were learning about pregnancy and all that sort of stuff that we decided to make a show about it. And we did a pilot through Story Hive, and then we got greenlit to do a season. And it was a lot of fun, and people really liked it. And it was just really fun to shoot a show, although it's terrifying making something about your life because, people are then going to see themselves in it and you have to deal with their reactions, etc. So a lot of weird extra pressure in there, but a great experience.
When I came out of the closet at 19, I had a number of fantasies about how my new life as a strong and independent lesbian would go. None of those fantasies had me being knocked up by a dude at 24. But life is full of surprises.
You're pregnant?
Yeah.
Have you had sex with anyone else?
Well, no one else with a dick, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, the thing is, too, is you don't pander to the audience at all. You could very easily make these characters far more stereotypical, black and white, plus and minus, but they're just fully fleshed human beings with flaws like any one of us, who are just, nothing but sort of shades of gray. And I think that's, why I like your movies and your writing is you don't go for the cheap stuff. Like, even when it's crude humor, there's always something behind it, there's always more to it. It's never just like, here's a cheap joke for the sake of it. Usually there's intent behind it.
Yeah. Well, even with like the shooting the musical, like the big overarching theme that I kind of worked into it is that like and this is such a bad theme to like fight to write into a script, is that the plight of a filmmaker to be seen, to get noticed, and to be recognized is not dissimilar to what a high school shooter goes through, who's usually someone who doesn't feel like they matter. There's a sea of people that they feel isolated from, and they're trying to get, I don't know, it was like, and so even with the songs, like with the ending song of the musical within the movie, I wanted to have all the themes of our movie that were like, the movie within the movie, and the movie had to have all the same themes coming together that we and so I just was kind of like tickled pink at the idea of like, how do I bridge these things together and make it sentimental? And like, people are like, oh, I cried during the ending, and that's really weird because it's a really uncomfortable ending that you're dealing with. And it's like, yeah, well, hopefully that worked. And like, Stuart and Lena, who did the music, just like killed it. And like, I can't really, I'd give them like a whole bunch of like, I do like the worst version of the lyrics type thing, and then they would like, okay, no, this is how we got to phrase it. Like, this is good, but like, you need to musicify it more. And they did just an amazing job.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Has becoming a father matured you as a filmmaker?
I mean, I think becoming a father, it's definitely made me difficult. It's difficult as a filmmaker, but I think it's made me like sensitive as a filmmaker and stuff like that. It makes me want to make children's content, honestly, because so much of it sucks. But I think it's made me in some ways a slightly better person. And I think that, and more of an empathetic person. I think that empathy is the key to decent filmmaking.
Has it softened you? Are you less cynical now than your 21-year-old self?
I would say I'm still cynical, but I'm not as angsty as I once was. I think I still have a lot of angst, but I feel like I'm not like fighting to prove myself every day. Like, I'm okay existing, and like, I'm okay like being like, you know what? I need to like take a few months where I'm not working on something creative and know that I'll still exist. I'm not going to fully disappear. And I don't think I was able to do that for a long time. But I mean, it's a lot tougher to make films as a parent, though. Like, every parent that works in the film industry is like, it's legendary. It's so hard to do that and to be a good parent. And like, I think we see a lot of like stories of like these filmmakers that are legends that are parents, and it's like, you hear stories where it's like they were a terrible parent, but they were a good filmmaker. And like, I'm trying to do both, and it's hard. Cause yeah, I know, even like I've met kids of famous filmmakers, and you get the impression of like, oh, I feel like this person has some daddy issues here, and like doesn't feel like they mattered to their parents. So I'm trying to be like very present with my child.
Well, let's do this.
And also try to create and build community. And I don't know. We'll see. I'm sure I'm going to fail at one of those things.
Oh, I doubt it. I mean, to me, that sounds like good fodder for future materials. Just that story alone, just throwing that out there.
There's a lot of funny shit that comes from kids. Like, it's so funny. And like the things that, and how they just are such parents of you. And it's so funny. My kid talks like he talks like a full-on adult, and he uses so much slang, like all the same slang I do. And it's just so funny. It's like, oh, it's weird seeing a kid talk like this.
And what was it like when you finally were able to sort of transition, or at what point did you feel a bit more comfortable where like the ground wasn't going to fall beneath you in terms of transitioning from being fully indie to, you know, now working commercially or doing a mix of both?
I mean, I don't think I've ever felt safe and secure. I think like, I don't know. I think my mindset is like slowly changed. I just get it. Like, I love working on, my favorite thing is working on like big projects that are going to take a long time and that have like monstrous to-do lists. Because like as someone with ADHD, you can kind of like jump around in those like to-dos, like, oh, I'm going to work on this now and then this. And there's like so many things to work on to help build that full thing. But I don't know. I don't think I've ever felt like secure in like my filmmaking career. I think we always look at other people who are achieving more, or, you know, you work hard and all of a sudden that person who like made like 2 shitty short films is like getting all these like huge gigs. You're like, what the fuck? I don't know. It's hard to not like compare yourself to others, but I'm starting to like not take all that sort of like, I take the work seriously, but I don't take myself that seriously now. And like, I don't feel like I'm not like dying to be rich and famous and like all that sort of stuff. You know, I just like really love telling stories and making audiences react. But I also like, yeah, I'll live if I don't become the next Spielberg. Like, I'm not gonna die. And it's tough, you know, I'm trying to also create a world where I'm making space for people that don't look and sound like me to make films, because like, you know, even with our film school and, you know, the world that we grew up in, you know, looking at even CKY, like I could see, you know, I saw myself in these like dumb drunk white dudes. And I'm hoping that, you know, and, you know, growing with other filmmakers who like didn't see themselves on screen and didn't see those opportunities. So, you know, it's like a balancing act of like, I want to make my own stuff, but I also know that I have to be someone who's helping other people with stories that are probably more important and needing to be heard than mine get heard, because there are a lot of barriers there. Even the privilege of finding a place where I was paying like $350 rent and making dumb shit with my friends on weekends with, you know, camera equipment that we were able to buy because, you know, we had certain luxuries, you know, even, you know, nothing like super fancy, but, you know, it all adds up. And I think there's a lot of like awakening these years to like just how much privilege is there. And you're just like, well, I didn't have these big grants and stuff like that, but like it takes immense privilege to be able to shoot a feature film for $5,000 on favors. And I have to recognize that and see how I can support other filmmakers that are trying to do that sort of thing.
Sort of bring me to 2 questions. I'll start with the first. Is our business teacher once told us sometimes it's easier to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Have you ever needed to beg for forgiveness?
Oh, so much. Yeah, I hate asking for permission for anything. I don't know. There's like a whole bunch of this, like, I think that was a good, I believe when you have no money and resources, that's your best plan of action. Plus I'm like really awkward at asking people for things. It's not always easy for me. And that's why I hopefully have producers that are good at that sort of thing. But what I've seen a lot of filmmakers who go through a program where they learn how to make films by the book. And then they attempt to do that when they don't have the resources or time to do that. And then they end up just like completely petering out and like, well, I just keep running into filmmakers who are like, I can't make this short film unless I have $20,000 and we can't do it. And then they end their story there. And, so I think like, you know, try to write things that you could physically shoot and things like that. But, I don't know, if a gatekeeper is like telling you like, oh, sorry, you can't make a film because of some bullshit rules that I have made, like, fuck them, just do it. I'm a firm believer that, you know, the cavalry is not coming and these are rules made by people like you didn't get to make these rules. Why do you have to play within them? Like, it's art, it's creating art. You shouldn't have to suck up to anyone or any organization to be allowed to create art. And I just don't personally like the philosophy of like, oh, if you want to make something, you have to kiss these several rings and stuff like that. Like, go ahead and make stuff. And if people are going to get pissed, like, fuck them. I don't know.
I guess I think I know the answer to this question already, but do you prefer to write your own projects? Like, have you ever, I guess, besides something you're not paid for, like you've worked on like film festival movies that you haven't written, correct?
Yeah, I have.
Do you still prefer to write and direct your own projects?
I mean, I think I write out of necessity. I never really saw myself as a writer until some of my films started winning writing awards, and I was like, what? I can barely spell. Like, how is this happening? Because like spelling and grammar were always so hard for me growing up. And like I was told in like grade 10 that I had like a grade 6 reading level and stuff like that. And so I just always assumed I was a dumb kid when it came to spelling and writing and stuff like that. And I didn't realize that creative writing and like writing with proper spelling and shit like that and were could be two different things. And I became a better writer out of necessity because I wanted to write stuff. And then I also dated a copy editor for a while, and she like basically taught me how to write. Like no one had been able to really crack it into me in high school, but like in my early 20s, I learned how to write basically. And I was a storyteller. And so I loved the idea that I could just like write a story and shoot it. And I could just think of what I was filming. And I was basically trying to like, this is the thing in my head and I'm trying to get it out. But I like collaborating too. I think that writing alone is pretty isolating, and I like having other perspectives in there. I would like, so a lot of the stuff I've written is because like I know that I can get that job because I own the script. But I would like to have more people approach me with scripts and stuff like that. Like I like to do my own little touch-ups in writing if I can, like, oh, let's add a joke here. And I think that we can, you know, make the suspense better here if we do X or whatever. But I'm happy to work on someone else's script. It's just like a lot of the scripts that I get sent and what have you are just things that I'm like, I don't really feel like I want to watch this movie. And then that's like the big barrier. So
interesting.
But if the right thing comes my way, like I'd love to jump in on it. But yeah.
And sorry, I remember my other question. In terms of you were talking about having other voices and just sort of different perspectives. Is that partially why you created the Run and Gun Festival?
Yeah, with Run and Gun, like a lot of it was, I felt like there was a lot of gatekeeping towards community events. Like, you know, a lot of them were based on pitches, and, you know, a group of esteemed people in cloaks and back rooms got to pick who gets to create and who doesn't. And so for me, I was just hitting hard walls with gatekeepers, and I couldn't get anything made, and was able to get all these things made and build up a certain amount of clout. And I wanted to give people opportunities to create, like just force them to create, but also like to like put up these new talent, like to put these filmmakers on pedestals that are making great stuff. And it's turned out to be like a really cool, inclusive film event. Like I think the first year it was, because of like proximity of us, it was a lot of like white guys making films. But this year, like the ratios have completely shifted, and we've got, I think the last 3 events in a row, like it's been a female director who's won. It's just been like a huge amount of when you open to everyone, you know, and everyone gets a seat at the table, some good magic happens. So I just wanted to get rid of an aspect of gatekeeping in film. And also I wanted a lot of, I had dealt with Crazy Eights. We had done our Crazy Eights, and they were, there's so much that they try to like dictate. And I think it's out of love. Like everyone wants to put their fingers in the pie. And I saw a lot of like films get worse because everyone's trying to listen to everyone's opinions, and some people's opinions are just shit and they should be, you know, just sit down. But like they're trying to please everyone. And that was a lot of the issue there. So with Run and Gun, it was like, let's do no rules. You can do whatever you want. If you want to chop your own dick off in the film, go ahead, do like whatever, puke, swear, everything. And there was just not many other events out there that were as inviting for that. And so, it's been crazy. And now, like this last year, we had 100 teams compete, over 1,000 people, I think it was over 1,000 people participated. I don't know the exact number. It was like an insane amount. Yeah, it was like 1,300 people participated. It's an insane amount of growth. And we became the biggest film competition in BC, and like still don't have major sponsorships, mainly because we keep telling gatekeepers to go fuck themselves. Because it's just like, people are like, oh, we're interested in them coming on board, but we'd like for you to make some changes of your festival. And we're like, oh, fuck you. No. Go, work with someone else. Like, we don't give a shit. This isn't about you. And I think it's been interesting to see, us trying to negotiate things with unions and things like that. And like really expecting that we're going to kiss their ring and be like, well, fuck you. Well, here's what we're going to actually do. And they're like, well, you can't do that. And it's like, says who? You? Fuck you. and
yeah.
They hate dealing with us because like, I just don't, I'm like, I'm not getting paid to do Run and Gun. I'm not going to be your admin or your mouthpiece. Like, unless you're going to throw some serious cash down, like sit down. And so it's been nice.
Well, you guys don't have to at this point. You can just keep doing it, for yourselves. And you're saving the final product from being diluted. And it's like when you have too many fingers in the pot, it becomes diluted.
Yeah, I think that ends up being it. And like this year, like I don't know, did you get to see the Run and Gun finals this year?
I saw some of them, not all of them.
I should send you a link. It's a great show. It was just like, it's one of the best film screenings. Like it's just the content is crazy. It's all over the place. And because there's it's the top 20 of 100 films. Like it ended up, not to compared to like a lot of other shows when it's like you only have a certain amount of films and you got to program them all. Like it becomes like a great show, and it's just so ruckus, the event now. Like we really treat it like a rock concert, and we like the winning film got like not only a huge amount of cash, but they also got a pot plant and all this sort of stuff. Like it's just a lot of like, we don't give a fuck. And it's been great.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I definitely saw The Departed 2, which
amazing.
Which the acting, like all jokes aside, phenomenal, all around.
The idea The Departed 2, for those listening, it was a Run and Gun film where they had deep fakes as the main characters. And so they had a deep faked Alec Baldwin starring in it, and like,
oh, that explains a lot.
Why it's like that uncanny look. You're like, what? That guy looks so much like Alec. Yeah, it's like deep fakes that they had going. And then the guy who played Mark Wahlberg looked enough like him, and they were just running out of time to finish all the deep fake rendering on that because they had to do it within 48 hours. So they kept the other characters deep faked, but Mark Wahlberg was just like the actor playing him. It's so good.
I got the last rat.
Yes, Dignam. But the thing about rats is you kill just one, 10 more take its place.
You get the fuck out of my face. Lace curtain prick, motherfucker, you.
I don't want to sound like my proctologist, but piece of shit, I'm putting you back in.
This is what it needs to be.
Yeah, he was so good in that. It didn't take me out of it at all. If anything, it made the movie better. And you know how sometimes you run out of time or resources. You have to really think outside the box. Like, how do we get around this? And a lot of times it makes it better for somehow, Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's just wild shit people were bringing to that screening. Sorry, I went a little hard last night.
Would you recommend film school to 18-year-olds coming out of high school now with sort of this YouTube generation?
I'm still on the side of recommending film school or something like it. Like, I think the thing that you need is some force to impose deadlines and some force to, get creative people that are like you together and collaborating and in the same room. So I think with film school, it's like, whether it's a year or several years, it's like a chance to try and fail. And it's very safe and contained because like, if you pull all your resources out in the real world and you try and you fail, it's really hard to get back up again, right? We all worked on Matt's film and it ended up being a dumpster fire. But like with film school, you have several chances to make stuff and to try and experiment and to find your people. So I think that I think you can learn everything about film, not at film school, but I think you need to find a way to find your people, work with them, and have deadlines. And I think that the excuse of film school and the apparatus is ultimately good. But the issue with film schools, though, is a lot of the people that are teaching in them are people that aren't necessarily, either relevant with what's going on in the film industry. They've been there for a long time, or they, are people that didn't really fit in the film industry. And then they're like, this is how it is and stuff like that. So I think you need to, if you go to film school, you should have a healthy amount of skepticism, but, really utilizing the people that you're going to school with as a big source of education. And hopefully you'll have teachers that teach you some great lessons along the way as well. But I think every film school has a few teachers who are like, that person's a total dud and a waste of time.
Not you though.
Not me. I'm
You're with it.
I'm hip with the kids. I feel older every day, but I don't know. I really do love teaching, and I try my best to always stay relevant. And as COVID's happening, I'm talking to all these people that are on productions and running casting rooms and stuff like that. I'm like, what's going on now? How are you doing it? How are you dealing with this? So we can kind of make sure that that's getting replicated in the classroom. And we were in school, they were like, DVDs is the whole business. And it was at a time where at that point, that wasn't even true anymore.
Yeah.
We were at the very last, the last video store was closing, I was working at one of the last video stores that was closing down, but they were just giving us texts that were straight up wrong because the industry changes so fast. And so it's tough to be hip and on track.
Yeah, I agree with you in film school in that. I think it's good to build that network. And a lot of us are still friends with everyone we went to film school with. And it gives you that foundation and that network you can kind of rely on. And, there are 120 of us, in the first year. Out of all those people working professionally now, maybe there's 20 or 30 of us, tops, which is not a bad thing. But the neat thing is people have filtered off into podcasting or, film festival, preparation, or, just because you're not necessarily producing films or directing, people have branched off and are doing different things that, at the time you weren't even, maybe wasn't even on your radar in film school. That's just sort of happened with time.
It's so interesting just seeing where everyone ends up, it's so crazy just imagining what's in the future. I feel of the 120 something, it's probably 30%, I feel are doing something somewhat related, or there's a few working in the e-game thing. So old.
EA games or
no, I just remember Conrad was working for Twitch and doing managing teams of Dota 2 players and things like that. And there's a whole bunch of really interesting places where people end up being, and it's, I don't know, life's a journey. There's no direct line, and a lot of people waste their money on film school, but hopefully there was something they learned there and they had fun at least.
Are you creatively fulfilled presently?
I mean, I think I'm looking for that thing that's going to creatively fulfill me. I think over the summer I was I'd finished the Hitchcock documentary.
My name is Alfred Hitchcock. I sometimes consider getting out of this business.
And I needed an escape that wasn't filmmaking. So I grew some weed, and that was very, very therapeutic to create something and not need a team of people to make it happen. But to still have that control and basically play God. I feel it was a lot of what I needed to like fulfill myself creatively. But right now I'm looking for that thing. I'm looking for that thing to jump 2 feet, that just jump all in on. And like, it's very tough to like, what am I going to commit, 6 months, a year of my life, more maybe on. And I'm humming and hawing between projects and like trying to find the right thing. So right now, not so much, but when the right thing clicks, hopefully.
Yeah, I like the weed things. It kind of reminds me of fishing with my grandpa, and that it's good to have a thing you're focusing on one thing, and you just do that one thing, and it's so important because I work as a production manager, and you're worrying about 1,000 things at once. You're always thinking like, okay, what's the biggest fire, and like what affects the most people, and then you kind of work your way down. But it's hard to turn your brain off even at night, and I can turn it off real good. But even when you're asleep at night, like your brain's always kind of like working, and I'll wake up in the morning and be like, oh, that's where if we do move this episode around this way, we can get this thing done faster. But you're not even meaning to be thinking about it, but your brain's still kind of clocking. Yeah. And so I was working on the Snoopy show for the last 2.5 years, and my contract was coming up at the end of August. And after 200 episodes, I just needed a break. And so I'm tapped out and in between work. But the good thing about that is I'm taking all this energy and putting it towards creative projects that I haven't done since film school, so it's been a lot of fun. But unlike you, I just needed some time away to kind of reset and like work on myself, basically.
Yeah, and I think we need those moments to like experience new things and stuff like that, because I think like you get tired in your routine, and like to make your films better and to be a better storyteller, you have to experience new things. So I was just like, I want to learn what it takes to grow good weed. And like, that was okay. I know nothing right now. I know that, you need probably soil and sunshine, where do we, or whatever it may be, or light. And then, yeah, I just like got like the fattest textbook I could. And I read everything I could. I got obsessed, and I learned a lot about it because I just wanted to learn something new. I got big into gardening in general, like just, tomatoes, all sorts of fruits and vegetables. It just like was a big part of how I survived COVID and like escaped the existential dread, because like I was paralyzed for a lot of that time. Just like, what am I even doing, and how do I even plan in a world where everything changes every 2 weeks? And like, it's been a lot of like rebuilding myself this year.
Oh, I can sympathize with that 100%. So I guess one of my last questions is what's next for you, but it sounds like you're kind of still deciding. So I guess I have just 2 final questions. The first is, just any advice you would have for young filmmakers, either in high school or, it doesn't matter what age. You could be 80 years old and you want to get into filmmaking. What advice would you give Grandma?
I think the biggest piece of advice I can give you is to stop waiting for someone to give you permission, and to just give yourself permission, whether that's entering a competition or making something for fun. Like, I think we are always going to go through our heads and think of 100 different reasons why I'm not going to make this. But if you commit to it, even if it doesn't turn out well, it's going to make you a better filmmaker, and then to keep that discipline going. And, if you don't have kids and you do have spare time, like try to just carve a certain amount of time into having a creative project. But I think it's important to always have at least one kind of creative project that isn't necessarily giving you money on the go, because like that stuff is fulfilling. And I also find that like, building community is fulfilling. So get involved, go out to events, watch each other's films. That's the biggest issue we have in BC, is like people aren't watching each other's films. And like, it's hard to get an interest for BC films outside of BC if there's not even enough interest here for our own projects. So, we got to lift each other up, and we got to really stop lifting up mediocre shit in the city. And I know that the gatekeepers in the city love to, this was made with all the right checks and balances. This is the big thing that we should all celebrate, but they're often wrong on what projects they're celebrating. So if you see someone making awesome stuff, make sure that you are an evangelist for them, because we need each other to survive here.
And what if you're like, Joel, I don't have a camera, how do I shoot a movie? What's a way around that?
I mean, like, I always hated the pandering of, like, you've got an iPhone and it's a great camera. But I honestly do believe that to a certain degree. Or find people that do, look at me, go to like an industry event, see if there's recent alumni. There's a lot of DPs that are like dying to get more footage for their reels. And like, there are ways that we can work together. People's goals can work together. So if you're trying to like write stuff, there's probably directors out there and cinematographers out there who want to make stuff, right? I think that like, I don't know. I think that ultimately, if you want to do this, you have to find filmmaking fun. You have to not be obsessed with making money, because it is so fucking depressing as you're getting started, as at least as a creative. And I think you got to really love it and have fun. And the most fun I've ever had making films is like when I was doing like shooting the musical.
Literally the most tasteless topic.
Or like shooting average dicks with my friends in my backyard type thing.
Bad news, Mike. The vet won't fix your leg.
What the fuck is that? They'll operate on literally every animal but human.
It's racist is what it is.
There's nothing more fun than just like making films with your friends. And the more money and the more gatekeepers and the more producers involved, the more it becomes a chore. So at least if you're doing it with all those people, hopefully you're getting paid.
Nice. Average Dicks. That's the name of my autobiography, actually. So.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. And then my very final question is, when I was a kid, one of my favorite things to watch would be like the stuff I wasn't allowed to watch. So my mom said, you're not allowed to watch Jackass or South Park. So when you tell a kid or a 12-year-old you're not allowed to watch Jackass or South Park, you just go to your friend's house and watch it twice as hard. Another thing I really loved was really violent Japanese anime, which, people like say like, oh, if you watch, if a kid watches something violent, they're going to become violent. No, I knew it was fucking fake. It blew my mind though. It was so fun to watch, like as a 13-year-old, this hyper violent Japanese anime. Did you have anything like that where maybe it's a bit of a contraband material that inspired you?
100%. I grew up in a Christian home, and a lot of things I was not allowed to watch. And this is going to sound like kind of morbid and sad, but my neighbor across the street, when we were in our early formative years, his mom died tragically, and it was a single dad living there who was working a lot of the time. But like Nick's, who was right across the street, Nick out, like there was not many rules at his house. And so like South Park, we got into like literally when we were around the same ages of the children. My parents had no idea that like we were watching it. And it was magic, like going there and watching South Park, Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle when that came out, Half Baked, Not Another Teen Movie. All these like R-rated films for me became like a religious experience, because this was the forbidden thing, and I found out that forbidden thing was awesome.
It shall be done.
And I wanted to make films like that. And I think if I lived in a house where everything was kind of allowed, maybe I'd feel less like I wanted to scratch that itch. But I think like a lot of the times when I was starting, at least, like I kind of wanted to make the shit that would piss off my parents. My parents are very wonderful people. They're like the most wonderful people in the world. But I think that there was, just like every parent is trying their best. And I'm dealing with this with Bowie. How can you see? Oh! I'm not that strict with what I show him, but I'm dealing with like his mom being upset. Like, I can't believe you showed him this. What the fuck were you thinking? And so I'm just trying to find that line. But I think it really made me the filmmaker I am, was the films that I was not allowed to see, and seeing those at my friend Nick's house, who had a big TV and no rules.
Oh man, yeah, that is awesome. Cool, man. Well, that's all the questions I had. Unless you have anything else you want to squeeze in there.
I'm hopefully you got something to piece in there.
Oh yeah, no, that was great. And you warmed me up well to my first interview.
What's up, everybody? And today we are going to be playing. Well, I don't really know.
Okay, so today it looks like we're playing Mr. Jack's School overall, what do we think of Mr. Jack's School?
I liked it. I mean,
if you were to give it out of 5 stars, what would you give it?
I don't know.
I feel like it's like a 3-star game. I liked how it was.
Teppich fliegt ist einfach schlauer.